in the agricultural sector, and I start with my old colleague, Steve Maxime, to tell us something about climate-smart agriculture.
Some correction on the chair. There was a mention about old colleague. Clearly that isn't applicable. But I must admit that it is the first time I'm sharing a podium on a stage with Dr. Trotz and Judy Clark in about 17 years. Because back in 1998, during the C-SAC program, we worked closely in this budding area called climate change, when we were up against a lot of the deniers and the people who thought that we were not just being at the moon. I must declare some initial bias before I start speaking. What I'm going to say has been influenced by some 37 years of working in this sector in all CARICOM countries, and in some countries even before they were members of CARICOM. So that I have a particular bias. I have a bias against one-hit wonders and magic bullets. And I'm very sensitive to the fact that climate-smart agriculture, as defined by FAO and all the experts, is an approach. It's an approach that is meant to reorient and transform. Reorient, which implies that, we are coming up with something magical and, never before seen. Unfortunately, I have had a front row seat in our development as both a passenger and a driver at times in our quest to develop the agricultural sector. We started off with production increases. We wanted to get all of these small farmers producing more. We wanted to increase the productivity. We introduced them to all sorts of fancy agrochemicals and technologies that were supposed to boost production and make them more commercial farmers. Then the same people who told them that a couple of years later had to come back and tell them, well, hold a minute. We know that you increased production and so, but we have concerns about food safety now. So all of these chemicals that we got you hooked on, we want you to sort of pedal that back a bit. And then when they got that part worked out, they got the production cost effectively done, got food safety, and we weren't killing people or damaging people or injuring people. We started telling them that, oh, wait a minute, you've been damaging the environment now. So that we needed to pedal back a bit on all the technologies that we introduced you to before and want you to be now climate smart, climate sensitive, eco-friendly. So I'm saying all that in the context of that type of history in the region, and here we are now at the latest technology that we are imparting on climate smart agriculture. I'm an advocate, I am a believer, but I'm also saying it tongue-in-cheek, having spent the last 37 years looking at how we've been trying to redirect farmers and what they do. So this climate smart agriculture thing has policy level importance with respect to overall adaptation and the nationally determined contributions, all these terms that have become very, very fashionable now post-Paris. It's subject to continuous technical modification because we are trying to get it right through research, and more importantly, as people like Mr. Green would know, due to on-farm implementation, because it's all good and well to have all of this adaptation, but we still have the small matter of adoption to deal with. It involves utilization at the farm level, and it also calls for individual commitment. Now, I'm following a format that was sent to us as presenters in terms of how we are supposed to approach each of these topics. So that climate smart agriculture deals with aspects of adaptation and mitigation. It provides a comprehensive framework to address climate change. It is meant to increase productivity and incomes, adapt and help us build resilience, and also in terms of reducing and removing GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. What have been some of the constraints to Caribbean-wide adoption now, of climate-smart agriculture? As I said, I've been lucky enough to have a front row seat in all the machinations that were connected with climate-smart agriculture and this new look, this reorient, this going back to traditional agriculture, really, because I've been around since the days of Lisa. Remember the days of Lisa, low external input sustainable agriculture? We spent a lot of time trying to convince farmers that that should be the way to go, etc. So what are some of the constraints? Some of this reorientation is going to be capital intensive. Our preoccupation with protected agriculture and greenhouses and is going to call for some capital. Even terracing. We are overwhelmed by the number and scope of the changes required, because one of the main tenets of this little chat has to do with the fact that we have approached climate-smart agriculture in a unidimensional way. We have come up with catchphrases like water harvesting, composting, and not in every case we have gotten it right. Most of the farmers, not most of the farmers, some of the farmers are unconvinced that they are going to be the benefits are going to be available in the short term. So those with insecure land tenure and so aren't necessarily moved to make some of these changes that are being suggested. And there's technology fatigue, because some of the farmers out there have seen us come to them with a number of technologies, a lot of the magic fixes that haven't necessarily worked over the years. And then, of course, there's the unidimensional approach and the greenwashing, which is my particular hobby horse. Because since it is sexy now to talk about climate-smart agriculture, that is where the funding is. So every dog and their brother nowadays has a climate-smart agriculture project. We're involved in water harvesting, and then what? For what purpose? Whenever I hear things like irrigation projects, a little vein in the back of my neck raises, because there's no such thing as an irrigation project. There's a water management project. Why are we going to spend all this money to harvest water from a watershed, which has been done before? I can assure you. We have cut down watersheds to put water harvesting projects in place, and I kid you not, so that we have a history of thinking in singular terms, in unidimensional terms when we talk about this. So what are some of the aspects of climate-smart agriculture that are more or less Caribbean-wide? Of course, the use of plastic mulch, protected agriculture, so-called greenhouses, wind tunnels, road tunnels, etc. Aquaponics, another really, really interesting one, really good one. And I'm sure the other presenters, who are more capable than I am will go into the details of all these technologies. Composting, which is another hobby horse, because every pile of grass and rotten material in your yard is not compost. And if you forget yourself and add meat scraps and so, what you have is a rat apartment. And with all the talk about leptospirosis and etc., we are finding a number of cases where people have piles of literal rubbish in their yard, and they tell you that, it's a compost, right? Composting, as you would see when you talk to the experts, is a more involved process. Terracing, another really, really useful climate-smart agriculture technique. Photovoltaics, and it doesn't have to be the entire roof, the entire greenhouse. There are simple systems that start at that level, and then, of course, the very famous water harvesting. And bringing in cultivars from climate analogs. This is the aspect of it that I'm particularly interested in, because what CARDI and a number of CARDI representatives here has been able to do is to go to the climate analogs, those areas where they're expected to undergo the same type of changes and challenges that we are experiencing or about to experience, and see what varieties and so are doing well there. And this has been a very successful part. This is my plug for CARDI, and I'm expecting my check in in the mail in due course. What are some of the lessons learned? Well, from my perspective, and my very biased perspective, I might reiterate, is that a lot of these climate-smart agriculture projects aren't well thought out. They're unidimensional in design, and as such, they don't often achieve the desired objectives. The desired objectives are what you get from the official definitions, increased income, sustainable production, etc. You need horizontal and vertical approaches. I mean, without going into the details, I mean, as much as we are interested in value chains, you really can't be having an intervention that you suspect is going to be climate smart if it only deals with one aspect. It doesn't fit into the overall value chain or into the mix of products, the so-called horizontal approaches to the production issues. The stakeholders are committed to adapt. They know that things are changing and they have to do things differently, but they want to have comprehensive packages available. All these adaptations must result in livelihood improvement to be sustainable. So what are some of the next steps? Some of the next steps aren't just about talking, they're about action. And this is why I was asked to lead off the batting here this morning, if you'd pardon the cricket reference. But really, we need to have a more comprehensive approach to climate-smart agriculture. And this is not just something that I'm twiddling my thumbs about. I actually developed a tool that is supposed to measure climate-smart agriculture compliance, following these 5 categories that I have listed there. So in terms of resource conservation, we're talking about resources like land, water, nutrients. Under energy use, we're looking at energy use for power, for lighting, for transportation, for input manufacture. So in other words, when we go down this entire list of these 5 categories of compliance, as I've referred to them in the trademark tool that I developed, we are looking at safety in terms of safety in the production operations, safety in harvesting, safety in storage, safety in utilization. When we had a discussion about H. pylori yesterday, I was speaking from rather bitter experience. Biodiversity support. How is your climate-smart agriculture project going to be impacting on biodiversity? What methods of land clearing did you use? What are the implications for invasive species? What are the implications for ecosystem services? Something that was also mentioned yesterday in terms of the type of services that are provided by a diverse, biologically diverse area, whether it be a watershed or not. And then, in terms of our greenhouse gas reduction, what about enteric fermentation? What about how we handle manure and waste? All the waste energy projects, are they going to be incorporated in the overall climate-smart agriculture project? So there is a tool developed called C-SAC, which is Climate-Smart Agriculture Compliant. It's out there. I have a YouTube channel. If you just type in Climate-Smart Agriculture Compliant or Steve Maxime, you'll be able to see it. What we have here is a mechanism to actually rank climate-smart agriculture projects based on the 5 areas of compliance, so that there's a scale that you can use where, depending on the level of compliance, ranging from 1 to 5, you can then ascribe the funding that is supposed to be going to small farmers for climate-smart agriculture adaptation. This is what I mentioned when I spoke about my bias, my particular bias. I'm finding that far too often we're having climate-smart agriculture projects that are not really geared to the producers who can benefit from it the most. And we have fancy-sounding projects like water harvesting and solar energy, introduce projects, and protected agriculture, where you have protected agriculture, you're only dealing with one aspect of the of overall compliance, because you're still using the same chemicals, you're still having the impact on the biodiversity, pollution coming out of these really expensive, really nice structures, but still not being fully compliant, in my view, with climate smart agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. When the first speaker came to the podium, I realized I didn't have my timepiece. So I asked Steve to lend me his watch, which he did. I was looking